To have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
I think it's interesting because, we just saw China last year acquire the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York. That was a big deal because a number of heads of state stay at the Waldorf Astoria, and I guess it was right after that deal was sort of locked up that President Obama said, I'm not going to stay at the Waldorf anymore because obviously the rooms are tapped. What's your take on this latest bid yesterday for the Chinese companies to try to break up the Starwood Marriott deal?
I think Chinese investments overall are healthy. Our concern is relative to national security interest. We have Chinese investments in North and South Carolina. The Kier Group, a Chinese company, has acquired a textile firm just right across the border from Charlotte. It creates jobs. Smithfield Ham, which will be in my new district. They're a Chinese firm now, so we're not at all displeased with their investments.
Do you worry that with the Chinese government, obviously, even if it's a Chinese company, we know that it's a communist country, so you could say it's Chinese government because they could get involved at any time. Do you worry that the Chinese government would be, in effect, owning some of the largest hotels in America? Do you worry that because of tapping and national secrets, do you worry about that? Is that one industry to look at?
I think it's something that warrants some oversight. Certainly probably ought to be swept if head of state is going to go in there. Those are security matters that I think need some prudent advisory role in it. But our concern really relative to the Chicago Stock Exchange is that you have the Cassin Company, which has Chinese government ownership, and they would be acquiring this company. They're very opaque. We don't know much about them, and that's the nature of the Chinese. Of course, the government itself has been involved in currency manipulation and cyber war and corporate espionage, and for all these reasons, we think it's prudent that CFIUS get a strong look at what the objectives are and what the concerns may be.
Morgan, jump in here. I'm just trying to make sure we get the facts out. A group, including Anbang, offered to pay $76 a share in cash for Starwood. And, of course, Starwood owns Westin and Sheraton brands, among others.
This is the same group, just so we know. This is the same group that bought the Waldorf, that bought the portfolio from Blackstone earlier, and is now trying to buy the Starwood. So it's the same. It's all related to Anbang. It's all part of the same entity.
So then China would own Waldorf, Sheraton, Westin brands in America?
Well, the Starwood acquisition is not actually physically owning the hotels because these are the management contracts. These are the operating contracts. Some of the properties that they're owning through Blackstone, they're actually going to own the land, the building, as well as the hotel. But the bigger picture here is much more related to the fact that the Chinese are offering cash. Marriott deal is stock, and so what investors will decide here will be, will they want the cash and take the cash? Because these Chinese companies have a lot of cash they're trying to deploy out of China and into this country.
But this is why we have something called CFIUS set up in Washington, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. And Congressman, I'd like to hear your take on this. But there have about 300 cases that goes to CFIUS every year. Treasury, State Department, all of the intelligence agencies sit on this committee. And these cases, are escalated to the president if necessary. So CFIUS is going to have to review this. You're going to have every intel agency in there looking at this.
It's not just the acquirer that the Congressman was talking about. It's really the nature of the company in the U.S. and the security risk of having a Chinese organization owning it, right, Congressman?
Exactly, and that's our concern, and frankly, that's the role and objective of CFIUS. Their overall objective is to seek out any acquisition that may have a national security intent. And certainly the acquisition of the Chicago Stock Exchange, we feel like could play a role in that. That's why we want a very robust review.
The thing is, China has, 10 industries that are deemed off limits to foreigners. That no matter, how much people want it or think it could be a good idea, they're off limits. Foreigners cannot acquire, for example, a defense company in China. They cannot acquire, for example, an oil company. There are certain things that are off limits. Do we have that in the United States?
Well, in terms of what we want to acquire, I don't think there's restrictions on what an American company can acquire. But we have restricted China from acquiring Western Digital, Fairchild. These are semiconductor firms. That's a very important component for our military equipment.
Yeah.
And all these things are relative to security interest.